Doug Byerly here at Bucknell University with Doug Birdsong, longtime voice of Bucknell University Bison athletics, the voice of the Bison. Doug and I had a chance to work together many years ago in his really rough years of working with me. We are here with DPP Sports, Dog Pound Productions, tailgates and testimonies, talking about athletics, obviously, but really the faith-based part of it. Doug's a man of Christ, and we're going to talk about his journey. So, Doug, you've been here 25 plus years, had a great experience here. I really had a great couple years with you here doing men's basketball here at Bucknell. Super experience. So, talk a little bit about your background, your family, how you became a man of faith, and then, how it all came together here at Bucknell.
Thank you, first off, for having me on, Doug. You're the best. And number two, I grew up in Huntington, West Virginia. I grew up in the area where the plane crash occurred with Marshall University in 1970. Actually, a few folks on the other side of our terrace passed away in that plane crash. So that's something people would probably recognize with the movie We Are Marshall. Graduated from Marshall University in 1987. And after that, worked a couple of years in the Huntington radio market at a station called WTCR. And then moved on to a place called Cambridge, Ohio, East Central Ohio. Worked for a company called AVC Communications, and worked there 11 years doing news and sports. Basically, it was news and some freelance sports at WTCR. Before I started college, I had studied with my brother and an individual by the name of Bernie Baggett, who had converted my brother to Christ. And so we did a Bible study, and I was baptized into Christ in August of 1983, and kind of just allowed God to follow or guide me, and I followed him all these years, and I know things have worked out great. He was the one, my opinion, I'm certainly thankful that he did, who guided my wife Gina and I to Bucknell back in the year 2000, July of 2000. And as you said, I've been here for over 25 years. Gina and I had a son in October of 2001, Dylan, and then followed that up in 2004 with a daughter, Amber. And Dylan graduated from Penn State University a couple of Mays ago, and then our daughter Amber is a junior at a place called Capital University in the Columbus, Ohio suburb of Bexley. But that's kind of a quick wrap. And of course, I worked with you for a handful of years, and you were my analyst for Bucknell men's basketball, and it was a great ride. Some of the best basketball Bucknell has ever played in its great 130 plus year history happened when you and I were behind the mic.
Yeah, it was a great time for sure. A couple of trips to the NCAA, very memorable. So you've been on campus for all these years, and as you know, I've been an educator as well, both scholastically and now at Penn State University. Sometimes that can be a different environment, particularly for those that are Christian-based. And Bucknell's a great university, but it is a liberal arts university, liberal arts based. Talk about that part of the faith journey that you've had here at Bucknell.
Really, there's a diverse amount of faiths here. Christianity is certainly one of them, but there's a whole gamut, and not only in the athletes, but also just in the student population. I think that the way I have kind of dealt with it is that I have tried to be a sounding board for athletes in particular, since we work with athletes, and trying to help them in their life walk. And then, if possible, if they have questions, gladly reach out in the faith journey. It's interesting. We've had some really strong, faithful individual athletes. One of them that just stands out to me is a guy, I don't think you had an opportunity to call games, but I'm sure you were able to watch some of his games. Stephen Brown, his dad was a preacher, and I remember interviewing him after a game on the radio, and he wore jersey number 2. And I remember asking him, why do you wear number 2? There was an individual who's a huge Bucknell fan by the name of Brian McGlinchey, and he had emailed me before, and he had said, jersey number 2, he's a little Deuce Coupe, the old song by the now I'm not drawing a blank,
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, but the little Deuce Coupe. And so he had said, why don't you ask him about that? So I asked him, why do you wear jersey number 2? He said, because I look at me as second, God is first. And that opened a doorway to be able to talk with him further about his walk with Christ. And so those kind of things happen. Here just recently, Matt Griffin, who is an assistant coach to his brother, John Griffin III, you and I were able to call John's games here at Bucknell during that time frame. Matt started a devotional on the road. So Matt, me, About 3 of the current basketball players, a manager, will gather together before the pregame meal and we'll go over a Bible Devo. So, it's not easy on a liberal arts campus like Bucknell. A lot of times it's difficult to be able to talk with people, but really the doors are open more than you would anticipate. There's an individual by the name of Bill Morrow, used to be a volunteer assistant coach at Bucknell in football. He heads up Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and he has really grown that program here on the Bucknell campus. And a lot of coaches here love the work he does. So, it is difficult sometimes to be able to see, but it actually happens probably more frequently than people would otherwise guess.
So the media world in general, you worked in private media and now kind of the university setting media for a long time. I remember you talking about if you could ever be the voice of a university, that was kind of your goal, and you've certainly done that at a very high level. But the media world in general, obviously there's a conservative side to that, but boy, for the most part, it is a very liberal-based thing, very bias-based thing. Talk about that since you've been on the private side of it as well. And you still deal with them. You still deal with companies that are private companies, even here at Bucknell. I mean, talk about that in regard to your faith journey.
Sometimes that can be a stumbling block, but I have found, again, that if you talk with people with respect, talk with them as human beings, as individuals, doors open. And then those doors can lead to being able to talk with them about God and about their need for God. And you'll find too that when you do speak with some of those folks, you find out that they are believers and they do follow God. They do allow God to guide their pathways. And so, it seems as if you would think that things would be very difficult. I have found actually, if you approach it the correct way, the doors are open. God will always open doors. Now it's up to us to be able to speak with people about God or in some way help them, maybe point them in that direction. But it's actually not as difficult as probably you would surmise that it would be.
Yeah. So final question. You've been in the sports media in particular for a long time. Someone looking to get into and get started in the sports media, what advice would you give them? Not just in general, but also in regard to the, hey, I'm a Christian person, I really want to get into the media world. What advice would you give somebody like that?
I think that probably the biggest thing to do is to reach out to someone. I'd be happy to speak with anyone who has questions. Get in contact with me. Just look on the directory on the Bucknell Athletics webpage. Be happy to talk with them, or email back and forth, or text, or whatever would be easiest with them. That's the first thing, because then you'd be able to speak with someone who could be a mentor. But number two, the way I did it is I went to college, graduated, as I said, from Marshall University, majoring in communications. So there are a lot of colleges that offer programs that open those doors. There are also, like Dan Patrick has his own kind of university that's over in the East Coast. I think it's in Connecticut, and you can look at doing that. There's another university that kind of focuses only on communications and a lot sports communications. That's Full Sail University. So those are opportunities. If you have a radio station or a TV station, even if it's a local cable access, volunteer, work with them, try and learn some of the ins and outs. They'll always take people to help, for free. I don't think that's a bad thing, because you learn some of the basics, and then from there, you'll hopefully be able to get a job that pays, and you'll be able to kind of, with that experience, network more. And it's almost always who you know more than what you know. So, I would say those are probably the easiest pathways to get involved in that. But the first thing, try and reach out to someone. That's just kind of the start of the networking, if you will. From there, I think things will just grow exponentially for people.
Well, Doug, really appreciate it for this session of Tailgates and Testimonies on Dog Pound Productions, dppsports.com. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Doug. You're the best, brother.